So good to see you, man.
So much joy.
Yeah.
Oh, touch
Always
wood,
the
dude.
best
Thank you so
start.
much for having me. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me. Congratulations, guys. 100 episodes.
That's
What?
it.
The actual factual, I shouldn't swear straight out of the
No,
gate
you're
of the
welcome.
podcast.
You're
but-
welcome.
You can swear.
You're doing super.
We swear.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
oh, well done. Well done. Seriously. How does it
Yeah.
feel?
So a quick intro for the people listening.
Oh, sure. So,
We
yeah,
are together with Amrit Sandhu, and we recorded the first episode together with you. And for funsies, we said, oh, should we record episode number 100 together? And this is episode 100 we are recording together with you. So that is super fun.
Oh my goodness. That's totally. I feel so honored to be episode number 1. I feel so honored to be episode number 100. And yeah, I'm excited for the fun. Like, it's always fun with you guys around. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. And I feel like it's almost like I'm gonna have to restrain myself from not interviewing you guys because I want to hear
You're
what it's been
welcome.
like to
We
have
do.
100,000, 100 episodes.
Actually
yeah.
didn't make a plan for this one because
No.
it was like anniversary
Yeah.
style.
Yeah.
Let's just
Enjoy celebrations,
just roll in.
vibes.
Yeah.
What's can I ask you, like, 100 episodes, was it as easy as you thought it was, or was it as hard as you thought it was? Yeah, how'd that go? How'd you go with 100 episodes?
I think one of the things I have been keep thinking back on, you said when we recorded episode 1, which we will link to from this one, is you said the commitment that you were committed and you have had it as a commitment for very long. You're on episode something crazy, right? What are you on now?
I've lost count, unfortunately. I should be more professional than
Yeah,
I think it's
many.
somewhere 500, 600. That doesn't make sense, actually. It's more because we've been going for 8 years now. We, for the first 6.5 years, did an episode a week, and now it's 2 a week. So
crazy.
that number's,
Ooh.
that sort of leans itself to 50 times 6, 300, and then probably around 500-600 episodes. Yeah, seems like more in my mind, but maybe my math is not adding up. But a lot of episodes.
I can't do math.
No, but
so I can't help you with
no,
that.
but I think being committed to it.
I think this idea of doing the 100 with you came up inside the first episode when you said the difference between just having a great idea and then having actually a success is just keep going, because people make 10, they make 12, and they make great podcasts, but then they kind of stop, and we said, okay, then we won't stop, and we'll talk to you again in episode 100. So
since the last time we spoke, I found this really interesting fact, which is, if you make more than, I think it's 3 episodes, you're in the top 10% of podcasts. And if you make more than 21 episodes, you're in the top 3% of podcasts.
That is crazy.
And it just goes to show how many people start podcasts and just don't work their way through it.
Fizzle out. Yeah.
Like right now, your claim, like one of your claims, like you guys have incredible claims to fame. So I just shouldn't. But one of your claims to fame now is like you've got a top 3% podcast. Because you've made it past 21 episodes. Like, you look at your stats and you look at all the other podcasts that have started, and that's not because, the reach may not, I'm curious to hear about the reach, but like, the reach may be or may not be in terms of what you want it to be. But at the same time, like the number of, like, you look at the iceberg and the swell of how many podcasts there are just by factor of how many people drop off. And I'll just echo the sentiment of what we discussed last time, which is, like in my early days, just how you picked that up from me, I picked it up from the people that were podcasting ahead of me, 10 years ahead of me. They said the same thing. They were just like, my podcast may or may not be that amazing. In fact, they were like, it's not that amazing. I don't want to say that about them. I think their podcasts are amazing. But they were just like, we just stuck in it. We just didn't quit. We just didn't quit. And I speak to business mentors now, and like some of the more holistic ones, they're like, they're looking after their health as a priority more than their finances. And I'm like, explain a little bit more. Because I think so many of us are driven by this anxiety, stress-driven world. And they're just like, yeah, look, if I just look after my health, I'll be able to stay in business for another decade. And it's all compound interest, investment is always, even like the time spent in business, right? Like, touch wood, like my podcast this year has, it's gone to a whole nother level, touch wood. And it's interesting watching the year-on-year growth because it's not linear. It's not linear at all. touch wood. So, and I'm realizing, had I have given up at 5 years in or 6 years in, because I know a lot of people that started podcasts, but had I given up 5 years, 6 years in, I wouldn't be, touch wood, I was going to say enjoying, but yeah, enjoying actually, I should own it. Touch wood, enjoying the growth that we're experiencing at this particular point in time, which is things are growing faster than they've ever grown, touch wood. But I think that's always going to be true at whichever point you are. But it's now you can see like the growth curve, and it's like, whoa, touch wood, things are really happening. So yeah, kudos to you guys. Kudos.
Thank
well
you.
done.
Yeah.
It's a good piece of life advice in general. We say that a lot, that to our children also. The one thing we never do is to give up. You can change your plan. You can change your
that happens
strategy.
often.
You can reorganize your priorities, but sheer giving up, that's not a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also it's I don't want to sound like it's a it's I think it's because I've got kids now. It's hard like for them as well, because there's so much perfection that's projected onto them. That perfection can be so paralyzing that it's like, you know, when you start, like I'm sure when you guys started with a podcast, like this happened to me. You know, how did you guys navigate like wanting to have like something that's polished, or like a podcast that you thought was going to be like this or like that, and now you just like, you know, you show up and you do your thing? How's that process been for you, having to not show up perfect?
I think that in the start, I did a lot more in the editing, and in the end, you just relax more. I relax more in my being. I'm here. I know I'm filled with fault, but if people want to listen, they are so welcome. And you also get better at sharing your thoughts. And actually, for me, quite egotistically, then what I get out of creating this podcast is me and my wife get some wonderful dialogues and talks, because we get inspired by the people we talk with. And sometimes we pick something up and it's a couple of weeks after we have talked with the person, we're still pondering about a subject they said. And if you, as Cecilia and I, are together like 24 hours a day, because we full-time travel, we live together, I work from home, then it's a really good external input of something.
Fresh injection of inspiration.
Yeah, and I also really like that I wish I would be better at doing it off podcasting also, but I like the thing about sitting down to have a conversation where you're like, I want to be here, I want to be present, and I want to get something out of it. And it hopefully has a value where someone else cares enough to listen. So I take the conversation more, I value it more, because I'm like, you cannot just sit and talk shit for 45 minutes, because why should anyone bother? So it's both, it actually enhances my own value of the conversation that we are recording it.
Me, it's two things, if I can answer as well. So one is my thing when we started the podcast was I've got a lot going on, and I'm home educating 3 teenagers, and I do all the household. I've got my blog. I've got all my things going on, all the things I want to do. So I told him, if we're doing a podcast, all I do is I show up for the recording. I'm not doing any tech. I'm not doing any emails. I'm not doing any planning. And I can leave as soon as we say goodbye, because usually I need to cook a meal. So in that respect, it's easy for me to not aim for perfection, because I only show up and shine, and that's all I do. So there's no working with it after. But the other thing I learned pretty quickly within the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 episodes is I really do trust this process. I really do trust that these conversations, people would not listen to them, and we do have listeners now. They would not listen to them if it wasn't, I mean, they could just flick and find another podcast. It's easy. They would press pause and do something else. So they listen to them because it makes sense, because it inspires them, because it lifts up their day, because of something they need, that they are in charge of knowing what is that they need. And it doesn't have to be 600,000 people listening. If I can touch 5 people's hearts, I'm happy. So, and I know that we do that, and it's also more than 5. So that's been, perfection has not come in the way, actually. It's not been a problem at all.
The reason I bring that in is because I think for the younger generation, like you were alluding to, I think they get stifled a lot by, they look at so much content online and people producing such high quality content that for them to get started, it can be such a smothering force. It's like, so it's really beautiful that you guys haven't need to navigate that. I think it's really interesting as well, feeling into just your vibes, Cecile, and just kind of how like you're like, yeah, I can trust this process. It's cool that you've like inherently got that, and I think there's a lot of feminine wisdom in that. For me personally, like I had a moment about 6 months into my podcast where someone from it was southern India reached out and was like, thank you. Like I didn't have, the impact that I was hoping to have at that point in time. I was like, what am I really doing? I was 6 months in, and it's interesting watching kind of like the markers. And this is going to sound really loaded sharing it in a podcast, and this wasn't. Anyway, I'm just sharing. But one of the key things that happened was this guy reached out and he said, hey, I just want to send you like it was a long email, and he was just like, hey, the synopsis of it was, hey, I just really want to thank you for your podcast. It's, I was considering checking out, and this has just reminded me that there are some important things in life, that relationships, and there is beauty in life, and there are things to stay connected to, touch wood. And I remember this visceral sort of like, oh, done. Like I'll continue working on this podcast, but like this could have just been it. Like, it just helped one person, like to that level. It's like not even that you need help to that level, but do you know what I mean? It was just for me at the moment, it was just wow, like there's something here, and I think I needed that little bit of like a nudge from the external at that particular moment in time. I needed that injection to trust the process a little bit deeper. That was definitely a way marker for me, but it's beautiful.
But that was the process, knowing what you needed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also the other thing
part of the process that you have to trust,
definitely.
that you'll also get the feedback you need when you need it.
As you need it, right? And so it's so trippy being on this path because, and that's like the dynamic that, like being a podcaster all of a sudden opens you up to interesting conversations. Because I love what you guys shared. Like, again, this is going to sound egotistical, but pardon me that for that. I was at a networking thing recently, and I was talking to lots of different people about lots of different things. And afterwards, we were went out to the cafe just with a couple of them. I was like, you were talking to a lot of different people about a lot of different things. I was like, yeah. I was like, most people don't really do that. They're like got their lane and they stick to their lane. And I'm like, oh, I've forgotten all about lanes. I'm like a podcaster. We talk about everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he said, that actually makes you very interesting. And I was like, oh, and this was a piece of wisdom that my friend Skip Kelly, who I've had on the podcast a couple times, reminded me. He's like, people think they want to be like inspiring, but all you have to be inspiring is be inspired. And in that moment, I was reminded, it's like, oh, if I want to be interesting, I just have to be interested. And as a podcaster, you're just flexing your curiosities, your interests all the time. So you by function of that end up being interesting. And again, that's the egotistical. It's like, oh, check me out, I'm interesting. But I didn't realize, like, we just take it for granted, it's like we're having these interesting conversations. Like you said, we connect with each other, and it's like a fresh injection of inspiration in our in our own connection, let alone, all the people we bump into. What a blessing. And I just want to quickly double click on something you said before, just before I forget. Have you guys seen the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty?
Oh,
I have not.
He produces magazines and he does the photographing. Anyway, so I won't ruin it. It's one.
I know which
really
one
nice
it is.
movie.
I'm not sure I've seen it.
There's a particular point in a film where he's a photographer. Walter Mitty's a photographer. He produces the photographs, but there's a photographer who's like the world's best photographer for, like, let's just say Time magazine, yeah. And he goes along, takes these photographs out in nature, like incredible, like things you haven't seen before. There's a particular scene where Walter Mitty has to go find this guy because the magazine's shutting down.
We have seen that.
Yeah.
They're looking for the last photo of the magazine, right? And they're looking for and so Walter Mitty's gone on his adventures, and he catches up with the photographer at this final point, at one of these points, and they're in the mountains somewhere, like snow-covered mountains, and he's got the camera lens set up, and he sees the snow leopard, and he's like, these haven't been sighted in something like a decade or 30 years or something, right? And he's got the camera lined up, and they're talking about life in general. And Walter goes, are you going to take the shot after the end of the conversation? And the photographer goes, no. And then Walter goes, what? And then the photographer basically alludes to the fact, I'm paraphrasing hella hard here, but he basically ends up saying, like, sometimes these are just for me.
Mm.
You know, and I think back to what you're saying, Jesper, about the conversations, you know, like you learn to have these conversations on air. And I want to ask you, but I can almost imagine, because I get this all the time. It's like I'm having a conversation with someone. It's like, oh, I wish this was recorded. This would have been such a great podcast, you know. But then it's like I remind myself of that moment from Walter Mitty, which is like, these are the moments that are actually like super rich and meaningful in life, where you step in like to conversation, listen deeper outside of life. And podcasting is actually enriching how I show up in the world. I just wanted to reflect on your point, because that I always get reminded of that exact scene whenever I hear what you shared to me.
But I mean, there are two sides of this, because on one hand, yes, there are moments just for us, and we shouldn't record everything, and we don't need everything on social media and a photograph of everything we see. And there are things to record with your heart. I remember my dad said once we walked in the forest, I must have been maybe 9, and my sister was also 9, and our brothers would have been then 7 and 5. And we looked back the road in the forest, and we saw the brothers, and they had stopped to look at something, those little beautiful kids in the spring in Sweden. And my dad said, I wish I had a camera with me. That's back when a camera was a, camera. And then he said, but I don't. So now we have to stop, and we have to take a picture with our hearts. This is more than 40 years ago, and I can still vividly see my brothers in that forest. It's beautiful. And I think with what we have now with the smartphone, we forget to do that.
Yeah.
And I've taught my children to stop and take a picture with their hearts, because they have a smartphone in their pocket. And I think the presence is really important. But then the other side is we have this amazing format of the internet, which is a game changer that was not there when I was little and not there when I was young. And it's there now. And we have this long format podcast where we get to actually say and explore what we mean and think and feel and understand and don't understand, which is great. And that's why we have these conversations with each other, and they inspire other people. And I started one more podcast over the years that we've, like last year, because of that. Because of the conversations, we're like, people need to hear this. So, yeah. So now we have 2 podcasts.
Is that one also just show up and shine? Or do you have to do a bit
I'm
more
hosting it, the other one. The other one is more mine. So Jesper is doing all the tech. Thank you.
I love
Jesper, the
but
guardian
I
angel.
have to do the planning. And it's called The Ladies Fixing the World. And I wanted to talk about it because you said something about perfection being projected on children. And I find that very interesting. So The Ladies Fixing the World is mostly about children and young people and unschooling, and how to do the parenting, and how to, when you do the parenting in an alternative way, how many layers that actually affects. Ooh. So when we say fixing the world, we're not just making a better childhood for our children. We might actually be fixing the world. So that's why it's called The Ladies Fixing the World.
That's epic, because the science is in now, right? Like it's 7, they say it's 7 generations down. And when you actually heal, like this is where the mystics come in. They say it's 7 generations back up the tree as well. But they say actually when you heal something for you, you're actually impacting 7 generations on from you. When you think about like what mothers are doing. Yeah, even just watching the way because like I said, we've got a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old now, and just the way we're showing up is so different to how our parents showed up, Touchwood, which, maybe my parents felt the same way about how their parents showed up. I don't know. But yeah, you like, it reminds me that this is the work, because those are the people that are going to inherit the earth ultimately, and it's pretty magical place. Like when you think about it, I was nerding out the other day on a podcast, just like the fact that we have an atmosphere. Like the more you stop to think, like Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's so many other planets that have their own atmosphere, but we have one that we can actually like breathe,
Oh man,
give back to, and then like interact. And then yes, the internet exists, but it's like, what is actually like the more you pause to just go atmosphere. Oh my God, like this enabler, like, you know, like this whole, it does anyway. I promise I wasn't high. This is just what Amrit's like. I was just tripping out on this is what happens
I
in
love it.
podcast, just high on laughs.
Yeah. So, but I actually have a question as you are our guest today. It will start with gratitude because the way your podcast started is something I still want to do. You started in your living room, hosting these kind of talk saloon evenings, whatever we should call them.
Mandala moments.
It has been growing in me for some time. We have done some things where we have arranged some talks where we come and talk about world schooling, world traveling, and the way we live our life very differently. But I miss the saloon feeling because what I liked most about that evening we did it was actually seeing all the other people interact in the break and afterwards, being able to create a room for connection, for real connection. And I was like, man, I need to do those saloons that Amrit started out with at some point.
We kind of need to stay in one place.
Yeah, or raise them somehow.
It's really hard to do.
Yeah. But there's no reason that you guys couldn't. Look at me. The coach kicks in and tries to find solutions to problems. Those Mandala Moments evenings were tremendously fun, and absolutely agree. If it wasn't for Mandala Moments, the podcast wouldn't exist. For those that are tuning in, that are a little bit of context around Mandala Moments, just a refresher in terms of where it came from was my wife and I, you know, we had this, my wife was a dentist and she had this existential kind of like, there's got to be more to my life than just going to work every morning, waking up, plugging holes in people's teeth and coming back home all tired and exhausted. Like, you know, yes, I get remunerated like relatively well. Everybody knows that about dentists. But at the same time, it's like, what am I actually doing with my existence? You know? So she had this moment, and then she went traveling for like 10 to 11 months to just go find herself. And on the beginning of that journey, like I was sitting in my living room, I was watching a Tony Robbins video. I got really inspired. I turned to share the inspiration in the moment of breakthrough with her, and she wasn't there. And I was like, oh, I had this really weird download, which was just like, oh, other people must feel like this. And so I decided every 2 weeks I'd invite people over, we'd watch something, or we'd share something, or we'd discuss something, we might meditate together. I'd make chai chats in community, and those were just because I thought alliteration was cool. I knew I was the average of the 5 people I spend my time with. I really liked the word mandala. You know, there was just a few things that just coalesced into this one, you know, offering. And I was like, yep, Mandala Moments. And every 2 weeks, and again, consistency, like the same thing, podcast every week, Mandala Moments every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks I'd open up my home. And yeah, just that hopefully provides a little bit of context on what Mandala Moments was. Now, the interesting thing is, yeah, definitely human connection, like in person, there is something else about it. I have to admit though, like, I don't think it's an and or, because I think people tuning in will be like this and or. Now, what I've found is back to, you know, the Walter Mitty conversation to some degree, like, because like I haven't really been in the same place as you two, but my life is so much richer for having connected to you two. You know, and that then informs my interactions with people in my physical 3D reality as well. But I've got to be conscious that I've got to cultivate that and cultivate this, you know, and not just become too lopsided on one side. Because like we said, it keeps things interesting. It keeps things like, you know, it's like, oh, you know, like I know Jesper and Cecile traveling around the world, raising their kids. I can't even imagine. And you know what? I was listening to them on a podcast and they get to go to like all these interesting places all over Europe when there's no one around, you know, like everybody's going during the tourist season. These guys are actually enjoying the sights. They've got them to themselves, you know, and that stayed with me, you know, it's just like, you know, and like that left a great impression in my heart. And so, you know, these conversations, they definitely, but the in-person also is impacted, but I like to see them both as like synergistically, almost like two strands of a DNA, you know. For you guys, like I think you guys have a bit of a following inherently already before the podcast, but there's an opportunity to sort of say, hey, next month we're going to be in such and such, you know, who would like to connect and go out, and you know, you can just start with a dinner.
If we
or
know
something.
where we
So,
are next month,
yeah,
that's the problem.
But you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it
Talk
every
about
month, though.
it,
You know, maybe just a
Justin.
couple of times a year. Yeah, a couple of times a year. You might just be like,
No,
I'm
but you're
premeditating.
so right.
Of course.
You know,
I think
and that'll
because
give you guys an
that is
opportunity to
our Achilles. That is really our problem, to
Yeah.
commit to plans, because we are
But now we have a good plan for the next couple of
spontaneous.
months, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we do. No, but let me get to the question, as it was a long turn. It was a long turnaround. So,
Sorry,
one of the things I've started to enjoy about the podcast is to get the chance to explore a subject, and these days I'm walking around thinking about freedom. And for me, it's I think it's a process I'm in to remind myself of the life we have created now. I haven't been in work in an office for 6.5 years, and we are still succeeding. We have had economics ups and some very downs, and we are up, and life is really, really good. And I'm like, how do you, Amrit, work with the concept of freedom, and how do you work with gratefulness in your life? Because sometimes I forget it. Sometimes I just like, I've created this life and I can be like, oh man, I don't need to do this and this. And today the sun was shining and I was like, hey, maybe I should just go out, meet my wife and kids, and be looking at this awesome castle in Krakow, Poland, where we is now. And it was such a nice sunshine and life was good. And I was like, yeah. And there was some beautiful art, but that's a long story short. That was kind of the question. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Freedom and gratefulness.
Gratitude, I think, is something that takes cultivation. Gratitude is an element of one of the series of seminars that we teach. So yeah, I've got meditations on gratitude on Insight Timer as well, which short 10-minute meditations, but you cover as much ground on gratitude as possible. And we generally start with 3 things in life that you are grateful for, and then 3 things about your work that you're grateful for, because so many people like have work but they like don't like their work. But it's like, actually there are some things, and we coach you through the meditation to sort of say like, what are the bits that it enables for you, and then 3 things about yourself, which are really important as well, because that cultivates self-love. And then 3 things about like 3 people that you'd be grateful for as a bonus, just to sort of remind you that human connections is like all the good bits about life. So that's like in a quick 10-minute meditation available on Insight Timer and on my YouTube channel. But yeah, Insight Timer. Now, the key thing in there is I generally just start every morning with gratitude, and I've just made it a habit. Touch wood. So I wake up and I just go through that really quickly, right? Like I just do it for myself, because I've just noticed that, I don't know, intuitively or spiritually or however you want to look at it, it just feels like so many people go to sleep, and maybe I heard this somewhere along the way. So many people go to sleep but don't wake up in the morning. Like that actually is so many people's reality.
That's a good one.
And you're up to experience another day. Like you're actually up to experience another day. And you can totally wake up with like, oh, my aches, oh, this and that, it's like it's the morning, and but the reality is you got another shot. You got another shot today, So for me, yes, trying to infuse gratitude in the little moments, but I noticed like I've actually worked with a lot of people as a coach now, like over 360 clients one-to-one. And I've noticed it's actually for those of us that are connected to gratitude, when you meet someone that's not connected to gratitude, it's quite harrowing. It's like, whoa, that can be your reality. And that's not to sound judgmental, but it's like, hey, can you tell me one thing you're grateful for? And then someone just sits there for 15 minutes in silence, and you're like, oh goodness, so I've, it can be quite intimidating. So that's where I feel like cultivating a practice is a good place to start. Just try, and then that's why, like for me, it's just a morning thing. Before I even meditate, I've given my thanks, touch wood, so gratitude. And also while we're talking about gratitude, just so I can be a coach for a quick moment, for those that are tuning, it's like, oh yeah, it's good to do, but let me just egg you on a little bit, right? Because gratitude actually is the best way to pray. Yeah. So if you're grateful, I share this as an example, right? So let's just, okay. Jasper, you're going to the shops, and, before you leave, you're like, you go to the shops, you come back, and I'm at home and I'm working away. Let's just run with this example. And you come home and you bring me a chocolate bar. And And I'm like, oh, he left the chocolate bar on the table. And I'm like, oh yeah. And I continue working. You did that something nice. I didn't express my gratitude. Maybe I'm an asshole, but maybe not. You know, I was busy working. Next time you're off in the shops, you bring back another chocolate bar. Amrit's always busy working. Maybe he needs a bit of energy. I'll bring back a chocolate bar. You bring back a chocolate bar. You leave it on my desk, and I look at you, and I'm like, yeah, cool, no worries. Next time you're in the shops, you're going to be like, oh, Amrit's working, but never really seems to enjoy those chocolate bars I get him. Should I get him a chocolate bar? You're doubting now. And so now you're like, yeah, fuck it. You know, maybe he doesn't want it. And then you come home. And meanwhile, I'm working and I look at you come in, I'm all excited. Oh, no chocolate bar. Fuck. Right, okay. Now that's scenario 1. Scenario 2, you go to the shops, you come back, I'm working away, you walk in with a chocolate bar, you put it on my desk, and I'm like, for me? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, thank you so much. Like, that is such a gift. Thank you so much. Like, I was hungry and I've been punching away so much work, and dude, that's the best. Love you, man. Thank you so much. Next time you're off to the shops, you're like, boom, I remember that time I got Amrit the chocolate bar. Yeah, like, let's pick another one up. You pick another one up, you bring it in, it's like, Jasper, thank you so much. Again, this is turning into a ritual. I'm so grateful. I really appreciate the fact that you're thinking of me. That is so sweet. I really appreciate you. Next time you're in the shops, are you umming and ahhing? Are you thinking about whether you should get me a chocolate bar or not? It's like, fuck no. You're like, man, it makes Amrit's day. It cost me $2 in chocolate bar to make my friend's day. Of course I'm going to get him a chocolate bar. You don't even think about it. Now the third time, boom, for Amrit's experience, more chocolate bars are arriving.
Yeah.
Simply through gratitude. And the universe works, I know this is super metaphysical, but the universe works exactly the same way. What you're grateful for, you get more of. And then when you get into like, I know this is getting super woo, but like law of manifestation, law of abundance, it's like, instead of saying, because one of the things I hear now as a coach from people like, oh, I want this, or I want that, I want this, or I want that, I want this house, or I want this car. All I hear is, I lack this car, I lack this house, I lack this. Your want, the universe is giving you that back. Like, I want this. You're going to be left wanting, because you're putting out the frequency of want. Yeah, as opposed to, hey, I'm grateful for the life that I've got. I'm grateful for this that I've got. I'm grateful, touch wood. As you're experiencing gratitude, you're filling up your cup in a very different frequency. And that's where master manifestors, if you will, say, hey, give thanks for it as if it's already happened, and work with your disbelief around it. But you don't have to go like super grandiose, like, yes, I live in this place where this happens and that happens. No, it's just like, hey, grateful for the small things. Like, I'm grateful for the house that I'm in. I'm grateful for the location that I'm in. I'm grateful for the family that I've got, you know, and then that starts to expand and grow because you're shedding more love, more gratitude, more chocolate bars start to arrive in that space. So that's the little spiel, sorry, pardon me, on gratitude. I just can't walk past it with like, but yeah, so I cultivate it by just daily cultivation. The freedom piece is really interesting to talk about, because I think I'm a bit obnoxious when it comes to freedom. I probably don't. Freedom is a very masculine force, in my humble opinion. Yeah. And because that's, for me, like, the feminine force in life is love, and the masculine force is freedom. Yeah. And you can kind of see it getting played out. Like, love in its shadow can be clingy, and freedom in its shadow can be fleety, you know? And so you sort of see it like, you know, in the age old, like, I don't know, maybe even 50 years ago, you know, like before the age of the internet, you know, the guy used to, the wife would be waiting for him with a home cooked meal, and, you know, he went to go get a pack of smokes and didn't even come back. You know, that's the shadow of like love and freedom, you know? So, so in that, to say, for me, I'm quite aware, touchwood, that actually I'm a man, but I operate from a place of love more than I do freedom. So I may not be most qualified to speak on freedom. And I preface that to say, for me, freedom is service, which is really interesting, because service, when you think about service, it sounds like slave, bonditude. It sounds like you're bonded to something. How can you be free? So, but my experience has been, and if you follow along with me, it is quite theoretical for a sec, but then that's just my operating system, touchwood, which is, we are all governed by the laws of physics. We are all governed by the universe to some degree, yeah, or to every degree. We are the universe looking in on itself. So we're part of this animate reality. Some people call it consciousness. Some people call it life. Some people call it Maya. It's an illusion. Whatever you want to look at it as, it's life, yeah? Now, one of my favorite philosophers was Spinoza. It's like, he goes, I can move my thumb as of my free will, as long as it's connected to my hand. I can't sort of say, hey, thumb, go touch the screen and come back while I keep my hand here. Yeah. And so the thumb is free, but it's in service to the hand, right? So like it's in service to the laws of nature. It's in service to life at large in terms of this is what thumbs do, and you're free to use this thumb as you will, freedom in service to the grand design of everything else. Yeah. And so that's where service comes in. So for me, and that's where a big part of my coaching lives. And, you know, like I'm so thrilled you guys have, you know, reached 100 episodes, because I think so many of us are living a life where we're in service to other people's dreams, other people's wants, other people's desires, other people's programs. Gosh, I'm preaching to the choir here. Do you know what I mean? Like you guys, unschooling, right? Like, you know, so many people are following the conditioned format. Yeah. And yet here it's like, okay, what is the universe? What does life really want for me to do and create? And it just comes back to three very simple things, right? Firstly, acceptance. Secondly, joy. Thirdly, enthusiasm. And we can talk more about these if you need to, but acceptance, joy, and enthusiasm. The things that you're joyous about, you can't fake. The things you're enthusiastic about, you can't fake. The things that you accept and only you can accept is like your healing, that's yours. Yeah. So those three things are where you're most aligned to the thing that you're put here to do. So when you're going to a 9-to-5 that you absolutely, there's no joy, you're not enthusiastic about it. That's not you living in service to your soul, living to your higher self, like living in to the reason that you were put here on the earth. You're not following your calling. That's why it feels uncomfortable. It's like the cat existentially is being rubbed the wrong way. Yeah. And you can feel it, right? That's a visceral feeling that you have. And so the freedom comes into, okay, how do I come best into service to live into my greatest potential, to live into the greatness within me, to live into, now these sound like grandiose topics, but you're the divine folded in on itself, looking in on itself. There's no limit to your divinity. Like, touch it, there's no limit to your grandness. Like, this is such a trip, what life really is. I'm back to that place where I sound like I've eaten mushrooms and I'm looking at the atmosphere.
It's fine, man.
But do you get, like, so for me, freedom is coupled with service. Yeah, they're actually the same. But that's also my operating system. Like for someone that is more love oriented than freedom oriented. Yeah. I look at like life in its fullest expression is to just love life fully, is to serve life fully. And that's where service is the greatest freedom for me. Because if you try to circumnavigate around service and honoring that love for life in any way, you're bypassing, or you're not living your own truth, you're living someone else's truth. And now you've been hijacked off your freedom. You've hijacked off your center. So it's weird, but like free to be as completely you as you can be is living in service to the grand design of why you were put here.
But there's, yes. And there's also this, when you talked about the masculine freedom, I remember meeting that concept of freedom when I was 23 years old and pregnant and single. And just in that, you know, I was a university student and now I was having a child on my own. And I remember people talking around me. I had most male friends. That was how it was. So I was surrounded by a lot of young men, and they all had that idea, oh, you're losing all your freedom now. And I heard that so many times while I was expecting my first child. And then I came home with her and I thought, you know, you're all missing out. I'm not missing out. You're missing out. You're not free to experience this, the meaning of life, the greatest love you'll ever feel, the most important job you'll ever have. You don't have that. And you don't even have the option to explore that because you don't. So freedom, this boyish masculine freedom of, you know, not attached, no obligations. I can do whatever I want, but you can only do whatever you want on step one of life. You haven't walked through that toxic door. Yeah, but when you walk through that door of commitment to what I just randomly got pregnant. That happens to a lot of women, and it happened to me. But I knew I'm keeping this child. I want this child. And I just knew. I didn't have to think about it. And that put me through one door, like in my life, to kind of a step 2, where there were 10,000 doors and they were golden and they had flowers and it completely changed things. And I just think that if you stay, I just claim my freedom over here in my corner, you stay disconnected, you call it fleeting, and maybe my fluency in your language is not, it doesn't really, I don't know
it's
what it
means. Fleeting means to,
is it unattached?
No, it's somewhat unattached. Fleeting is to.
Oh, he translated it. I understand it now.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, fleeting. Yeah.
Flyktig in Danish. Yes.
Well, even like because my wife and I we're contemplating another kid. Yeah, like we're trying to go
do it. We've got 4.
Yeah,
I know. And at the same time, we're looking at like the life structure, the ambitions we have for our kids, and the things. And obviously, we should probably talk more about that in a podcast or on our podcast. But there's so much in there that it takes in today's society to raise a kid the way that you think you want to. That is like, it does seem quite. And then all of a sudden, it's like, I don't feel free. And it's like, actually my freedom is to commit more to another child. So, back to your point, which is like, all these people were like, oh yeah, like you're losing your freedom. And it's like, actually, now that I've experienced child, like I want to be free to be a father again, but actually it's quite like there are constraints and those aren't real constraints. And, it's like, oh, this is all in the mind. It's really interesting. It's really
I think you said it. Maybe we should do an entire podcast on unschooling where, we flip it and we answer it's about that. Because I have so much to
No.
This one. Because there's a bit.
There's a lot that goes into it.
It's a lot.
So going through, all the episodes you have recorded since we met last, which is around, small 2 years. Is there something that stands out? What have you picked up? Because that's one of the things I find most interesting is, these things that linger sometimes, where you're like, and of course, with all those episodes, it maybe can be difficult to choose.
Well, yes. So there's one thing that definitely stands out, and I somehow just keep circling back to this when someone asked me this question. I did a podcast with Marianne Williamson when she was running for her presidential election campaign, and she talked about power and love. And it was really interesting because we're talking about feminine, masculine a little bit in this conversation now. And she basically was quoting somebody, but for somehow it viscerally landed 2 things. One of the things she said was, power without love is corrupt, and we all know that. But love without power is also anemic, and we need to wake up to that. Especially people like yourself, myself, that believe in a path that's more loving, more open, more heart-centered. Taking photographs with our heart, we're inclined a certain way. But then it's like, there's also got to be some form of showing up to do a podcast regularly. That's power. Yeah. That's power. It's gentle, but it's strong. It's weird, huh? What's possible. So that was really profound to understand, because I think so many of us are inclined to show up loving, but then we're forgetting that actually there's you need to show up with your power in love as well. So that was really affirming. Also, one of the other things she said in the podcast, which was really helpful for me and it has stayed, is oftentimes, and maybe just because it's the frequency of the inspired evolution is like, hey, tomorrow brighter. When you unpack it a little bit, it's like inspired evolution, tomorrow brighter. But as a coach, it's like presence is a big part of what I teach. And what Marianne said in that episode was, hey, it's a practice of mine to make sure, to trust, that the future is best looked after by me being as present as possible in the moment, here and now, today. And my favorite word in all of that is actually practice. Because it's like, it's not just something that you've got or you don't got. It's like, it's a skill, bruh. You got to work on that every day. It's like tomorrow this, and the world naturally has so much anxiety baked into it, especially 21st century internet, like the frequency is speeding up. There's like keeping up with things that, like, you know, just taking the time to sort of go, actually, that's tomorrow. But that is best looked after by me being as here as possible, as now as possible as I possibly can be. And when you stop to think about it, I'm the engineer, right? So you stop to think about it, it's like, yeah, this is where I've actually got most of my resources, not over there. My resources are all here. Can I just collect myself around my resources in the present moment, in the moment here and now? So that's been profound. Another thing that's been coalescing recently is, and this has been profound as a because I've been a meditation teacher for a long time now. And even just being able to distill the nuance between presence and presence. So in the present moment, so meditation brings you into the present moment. Yeah, like you become present. But that is often conflated, early days meditating and those on the path, with presence. Like the presence of something larger, the presence and your connection to God, your connection to something divine. Now, becoming present is a great start to connect in. But those are two different things, right? Once you've built a connection to presence, that sort of celestial, or however you want to call it, I need better words, but still forming this, then becoming present does help you connect in. But don't forget, like, it's not just about mindfulness and just becoming present in the moment. That's step one. But also living your life with a certain amount of grace and connection, touch wood, to something that is deeper, spiritual, that matters to you. So that's been coalescing at the moment. In terms of podcasting as well, and this is just because I want to sort of just share some insights with you guys as well. So for the first 6.5 years, the podcast was personal development. You know, we talked about wealth, financially independent, retiring early, unschooling, topics such as, you know, we talked about all sorts of different things that can help you enrich in your life and live in different ways. 6.5 years in, we started producing 6 years in. I took a moment to look at all the content that we'd produced, and I did like this glance over and had a look and said, so what content has been performing better, right? And I saw people don't really dig the financial stuff coming from me. People kind of don't really dig relationship stuff coming from me. They did really enjoy like psychology, personal development type sort of stuff. They really enjoyed mindset type sort of stuff. But then the spirituality stuff blew everything out of the water. It was like I could do 10 spirituality episodes a year and get the same viewership, listenership and it's not about the viewership and listenership, but this was like the metrics, and this is where analytics becomes really helpful. And I was like, I could just do 10 of those a year, or do like 50 of all the others. So these episodes are like 10x or 5x of all the other episodes. Now, not from a place of greed of kind of going, hey, I just want my podcast to grow really fast and do, but at that point in time, I'd put in enough work, and you guys are getting there, put in enough work to be able to look back at the stats of your podcast to feed you information on what is it that my audience really wants.
And if you are in service,
and what is the value? Yeah, right. And that service, and what value are they getting? And then it's like, okay, now you got to be careful. You don't want to double click on something that's not authentically you. And this is where understanding your values is incredibly important. Mine's a connection, contribution, celebration. I always talk about values. For those that want to discover their values, inspiredevolution.com/values. Go find out yours. 20 minutes masterclass. Little plug, but seriously, changes your life knowing your values. But the key thing in there is, now that if you can just take the moment to get clear on, like, this is what we're really, really, really here to do. Like, for me, other people are like getting this particular point of value from the podcast, right? And it's like, okay, do I really love spirituality? And it's like, yeah, I absolutely do. Do I love the other stuff? Yeah, I absolutely do. How would I feel if I just did a spirituality podcast? And I'm like, I thought I had to do all the other stuff as well, just to give the podcast enough credibility so that I could every now and then throw in some spirituality as well. You're telling me I can just do spirituality and And that's what the analytics were like saying. They're like, yeah, and actually you do better. And it's like, fuck off.
Yeah, I'm in for it.
And I was like, and I gave myself permission to double click, touch wood. And then when you start to look at the recent growth, how it's, you know, growing faster, that's because we understood. But also, I don't think you can just wake up and just be like, oh yeah, like I'll look at like my analytics after 10 episodes. But the number of episodes you guys have done now, 100 episodes, you can look back and see which episodes perform best, see the common threads and see, not from a place of greed, but from a place of
interesting.
from a place of service to the audience. This is what they really want to hear. This is what they're loving. How can I serve them better in this vein and then go deeper, as long as it aligns to your values and you're clear that, you know, because one of the things, I'll just be clear, like there's lots of channels at the moment in my similar space that spirituality, right? But at the moment, and a part of spirituality is also like UFO and aliens, which I don't know enough about. There's also like channelers channeling, you know, entities. And now I don't know enough about that. I know that my content would perform pretty well if I double clicked on that, because other channels that are in my space, they do really well with those episodes. But for me, I don't know, like, how do I know who you're channeling, what their intentions are? You know, I don't know. So I don't do it, you know? And that's where it's like, you don't just follow your analytics blindly. You've still got to use your own discernment, you know? Do I know whether we've had contact or not? I don't know. Some people seem very convinced one way or the other. I'm on the fence about it. So for me, it's like, I don't really need to have that conversation. You know, there's plenty of other conversations to be had. So I just continue enjoying those. Would my podcast grow faster if I had some of these conversations? Yes, because I know my audience is interested in those topics. But at the same time, that's not Amrit.
No.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The discernment, but also the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to share one sentence from an interview we did with a guy called Jack Stewart, a wonderful homeschooling dad. And it is still lingering with me, and therefore I wanted to share it with you. He said the sentence, for me, the internet became a social appetite suppressant. Yeah. So what he meant was that the whole internet became, he turned it off, man. And he don't have internet at home. He don't have a smartphone. He have a normal phone at home. So sometimes he needs to work and do his stuff and have some internet time. But he found that he was lonely when the internet was turned off. He ended up, yeah. That's cool. No, yeah. And so when he turned it off, he felt, oh, I'm missing something. And he actually went out to his neighbors and said something like, hey, can you come out to play? Can we have a cup of coffee? So for him, it inhibited his lust to be around people in real life. And after that, I've seen it in myself. I've installed a Freedom app to get me off more stuff and be more, trying to be more connected to other people, because I can fall in sitting in front of the computer also because it's my work. So it's like a double-edged sword for me that I sometimes falls in.
I totally get it. That's profound. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because it is, and like you, I operate my phone in black and white mode, and I notice it makes a massive difference. I know that.
Oh wow!
Practical trick, but
I will try that.
Yeah. Can I share the opposite?
Yeah.
Because at the moment we're in Krakow for a month, and we have the honor of bringing 2 extra teenagers. So 2 of our kids' friends are with us. And I've been discussing how the smartphone flows in their lives. And also we are in Krakow at the same time as a lot of the world schooling community. So there are many teenagers who travel full time in town at the moment. And so we're flowing with a bigger group. And I observe and I discuss with the 5 that live with us, how is it to be a teenager? They grew up with this in their hands. It's different from them even than from you.
Magic
and you're what, 12, 15 years younger than us, but they are, you know, even younger. And after I've been observing them and talking with them, I see how the phone for my particular, plus the 2 I'm bringing, teenagers, it's a very good social token. They are not doing random stuff. They are sharing photographs. They are looking up poems and quotations that they share with each other. It comes out, look at this, I have seen, and they text each other to stay in touch with people on the other side. So these are traveling kids. They all have friends all over the planet. They stay in touch with friends all over the planet via their smartphones. And after having good conversations with them over the first, 3 weeks we've been living with these people for 2.5 months. I decided I need to spend more time on my smartphone. Actually, I could reach out to my friends. I could be present in my relations with people who are not in the same town as I am if I spend more time on my smartphone.
I can't help but feel that this, Oh, sorry, I'm interrupted. Sorry.
No, I'm just trying.
But that is in the being social.
Of going to unplug the entire internet because you're using it in a way that's not working for you.
Yeah.
To me, the other extreme is to not use it enough.
Well, I think that's I feel very Buddhist in this conversation because they call it the middle path, right? In most of the things in life. And so I think that rings true here as well. For someone like Jesper who's working away on the internet and then the distractions of being online, and then it's like, I've spent 2 hours online, and it's like at the end of the day, it's like I've done my social mediaing and I've done my working. I need human connection. Someone like yourself, Cecile, who's like meals, boom, boom, your hands are in the earth, gardening, like doing all the things, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I've filled up my cup, like I'm super grounded, but I also haven't connected to other people, right? So I think there's definitely a balance between the two. For me, the awareness even 8 years ago was I could feel that social media was, I believe in the power of it. It was definitely keeping me connected to my friends, but I also noticed, and this is something that goes back to when I was working as a bartender, way back when, this is like high school. I remember I had this awareness that like I was either, when I was leaving the house, I was either spending money or making money. No, it's a bit grandiose, like obviously, and sometimes you don't, but generally speaking, I was either going to spend my money or I was going to make some money. That was what was going on for me at that age. And I remember going to work as a bartender and I was like, this is brilliant. Because I see like all my mates are on the other side of the bar. I'm making money. They're spending their money. Yeah. But I'm having a great time. Like I'm actually having a great time serving beers, having chats. The chats I'm having, like I was loving it. I'm still connection, contribution, celebration, right? Now, what I'm hearing, like for me also, like 8 years ago when I was setting up the podcast, I'd never really coupled those two things together, but I'm doing it in this conversation. It's interesting because I realized people are creating content and people are consuming content. And I realized when I was consuming content, I was very much like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, that's interesting. And I was like much more at the mercy and whim of other people and their thoughts. And that's like, I still have people that influence me today. They're like, they don't know they're my mentors, but they're my mentors. I'm listening to them online. Yeah. But at the same time, there was like this awareness of like, yeah, but also the possibility of creating content like you guys are doing now, 100 episodes in, like, I've been doing for the last little while. You have even these conversations that we're having today, like being able to understand the balance between consumption for people. Some people, that's not a conversation. It's just consume. And there's like an insatiable appetite around it, yeah, I think consciously creating content is a bit of a hallowed ground to find some footing around the more treacherous nature and aspects of social media. Because now that you're creating a podcast, you can see the value, Cecile, which is like, hey, I get to connect to some really interesting people. I can actually use this as a tool for good. Yeah. Whereas for some people that don't have creatorship in their mind, they've just got consumership in their mind. They're just like, I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as this person. This is really interesting, but I'm not good enough for that. And it's like the subconscious fears, they sort of run rampant, and that's where I think I feel honored and literally to be your first guest, to be your 100 episode guest, because you guys are creating something, touch wood. When I created the podcast, I know this sounds like I listened back to my first ever episode, which was just me talking like, hey guys, I'm Amrit. And I'm not sure, like this exact conversation, I was like, I'm not sure about creating more noise in the world around podcasting and, more media for, there's like all this treacherous side to it. But, I'm inspired by people like Bob Marley. Like they recorded something, they shared it on, and the echoes of that live through the ages for positivity and love. Now, I don't want to sound grandiose, like I'm not Bob Marley, but I'm inspired to evolve, and I'm calling the podcast Inspired Evolution. And so similar vein, you guys here doing something positive, yeah, and like using the platforms to create a ripple impact, more information, more education, more awareness, more positivity, more love, more wisdom, yeah. And I think therein lies like a real opportunity for people to show up, to actually create, to share more of what they want to see in the world. And that's been a driving force for me as well. And watching you guys do what you're doing now, and feeling that like, oh, something touched with that I was inspired by, inspired you guys to, and look at you guys go. I was just like, man, I got all the vibes. I got all the vibes. Touch wood. So yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic, the online world, the physical world. But I think ultimately, yeah, connection is a beautiful thing. Connection is a beautiful thing.
Well, it comes down to the value system, as you say. The most important thing you can do is know your values, and if you know why you do the things you do,
you're safe.
And the smartphone here, it's just a tool. It's just a, like you can use a hammer for a lot of different things and a knife for a lot of different things. You might make a meal, or you might cut your finger. It's not the knife that's the problem. It's why are you using it, and what are you using it for? And I think we spoke to two different people on the podcast who did the radical cutting off the internet completely, and it put us in a space where we thought about it a lot and discussed it with the teenagers. I would never take it away from my kids, but it's just what role does this play in your life? And as you said, the middle way, but the middle way is an informed middle way. It's not in between two things. It's, why am I using my smartphone the way I am? Why am I using my sleep the way I am? Why am I eating in the way I do? How am I exercising? What is my education? Why am I doing it this way, not that way? All of these question everything conversations, they just have to keep rolling. You can never stop it. It's like working out your abs. You just have to keep doing it. There's no I've done that. Yeah.
One of my yoga teachers from back in the day always said, do your practice and all will come. And I keep that in mind. And as Cecilia said, it is the informed middle way. Amrit, one of the other things we learned about podcasting for us is that we decided to try to keep our episodes to around 1 hour, because it's the only way we can fit it into our crazy life. And where you are now, it is early morning. What time is it?
8 a.m.
Yeah, and thank you for going up early and being with us. For us, it just turned 10 p.m.
I haven't cooked dinner yet.
No, because we have been out exploring.
Thank you guys so much for fitting me in.
It's another way of saying, Amrit, super much thank you. I hope we can see you again for at least episode 200. That would be great fun if you're up for
oh my god, I'd be more than up for it. It would be such a blessing.
Yeah, maybe 150. Yeah,
whatever feels right for you. I'm always honored to be on your podcast, guys. I am so, guys, just seriously, wholehearted congratulations. It's a total labor of love. I'm glad, Cecilia, you get to show up and shine. Jesper, great work on working on the back end and hashtag making it work. And I'm glad the curiosity is enriching you guys' life. And I couldn't think of two better people to have a podcast, to be honest. There's so much important stuff that you guys are, like you mentioned lightly, Cecile, on the layers. There are so many layers that you guys are working through. And I know the courage that takes. There's a total spiritual warriorship in there that is called upon. And I feel so honored to have been part of your journey, to continue to be part of the journey. It's such a blessing.
Let's do it.
Thank you guys so much for having me. An absolute pleasure.
It was a big pleasure. And thank you for your time.
All the best on the next 100 or 50 or however before you get me on, but all the best in the next set of episodes as well. Big love.
Thanks a lot for being there. Bye.